Hello, and welcome back to Umbral Dread. Before we begin, take a moment to leave a comment and tell me where you're listening from tonight. I always enjoy reading them. Tonight's journey is 2 hours of slow, immersive horror stories, crafted to help you unwind, quiet your mind, and drift deeper into the darkness. There will be only 2 or 3 ads during the first 10 minutes. After that, the rest of the experience is completely uninterrupted. If you enjoy calm, atmospheric horror designed for late-night listening, don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new story. Now, make yourself comfortable. Let your body become perfectly still and allow the sounds of the outside world to gently disappear into silence. Tonight, beyond the fading light, a forgotten tale is waiting, hidden where the shadows have never left. So close your eyes, listen closely, leave the waking world behind, and step quietly into Umbral Dread. Let's begin. Story 1. It has been 19 years today since Alex disappeared. Even after all this time, the memory still sends a chill through me. Some mornings, I wake up before sunrise with the old questions already waiting in my head. What if I had not called him outside that day? What if we had stayed indoors, arguing over board games and fighting over which cartoon to watch? What if I had walked him home before it became late? What if I had searched for him sooner? For months after he vanished, I read every newspaper I could find. I searched through columns about missing children, suspicious strangers, escaped criminals, and kidnappers passing through nearby towns. I watched the evening news and listened whenever adults spoke quietly about children who had disappeared. I was desperate to find an explanation. I needed there to be a man in a van, a criminal hiding near the woods, or some other terrible person who could be blamed. There had to be a reason a 13-year-old boy could disappear between one breath and the next. I sat at my desk and stared at those words in my diary. It had been years since I last opened that particular notebook. The cover was cracked, and many of the pages had turned yellow. Most of what I had written inside came from the months after Alex vanished. The entries were filled with fear, confusion, and carefully written lies. I closed the diary. Across the room, my son sat on a playmat, surrounded by brightly colored Lego pieces. He was still too young to build anything complicated, so most of his creations were simply towers of mismatched blocks that fell over as soon as he tried to lift them. At that moment, he was chewing on a red piece. "Don't put that in your mouth," I told him. He removed it, smiled at me, and immediately reached for a blue one. I shook my head, though I could not stop myself from smiling. He was only 4 years old. He had my dark hair and his mother's wide brown eyes. He followed me everywhere when I was home and copied almost everything I did. If I crossed my arms, he crossed his. If I bent down to examine a plant, he bent beside me and pretended to study it too. He looked at me as if I understood everything, as if I were brave, wise, and completely good. I suppose every child believes that about their parents for a while. Sometimes I wondered what life would have been like if Alex had not disappeared. He would have been 32 by then. Perhaps he would have married and had children of his own. Maybe our children would have grown up together. We might have visited each other on weekends, complained about work, and laughed about the foolish things we did as boys. I often imagined teaching him how to garden. Gardening had become my favorite hobby as an adult. There was something peaceful about placing a seed in the ground and helping it grow. Plants did not ask questions. They did not care about the past. If you gave them sunlight, water, and good soil, they rose from the earth without judgment. That morning, I decided to plant sunflowers. I had bought the seeds at a city fair the previous week. The picture on the packet showed bright yellow flowers standing taller than a man, their dark centers facing the sun. Sunflowers had always seemed happy to me. I wanted a row of them along the back corner of the garden where my son could see them from his bedroom window. I put on an old shirt, found my gardening gloves, and carried a hoe, a shovel, and 2 bags of fresh soil into the backyard. My son pressed his face against the glass door and watched me. "Papa, can I help?" "You can watch for now," I said. "When you're bigger, you can help me dig." "I'm big. You're very big." He seemed satisfied by that answer and returned to his toys. The morning was cool, but the sun was bright. Autumn leaves had begun gathering along the fence, and the grass still carried drops of water from the night before. I chose a spot near the far corner of the yard. That part of the garden had always been difficult. The soil was packed tightly and filled with stones. Nothing I planted there seemed to grow well. Still, the sun reached it for most of the day, so I thought the flowers might survive if I dug deep enough and replaced some of the old soil. I pushed the shovel into the ground. The metal struck something hard. For a moment, I thought it was another stone. I shifted the shovel and tried again. This time, it entered the earth. I began digging. With each movement, the smell of damp soil rose around me. It should have been comforting. Instead, it awakened memories I had spent years trying to bury. I remembered another yard in another time. When Alex and I were children, we loved digging holes. We buried things we believed were valuable: glass marbles, toy soldiers, bottle caps, coins, and handwritten notes. We promised each other that we would return when we were adults and dig them up. "We'll be old men," Alex once said. "We won't be that old," I replied. 30 is old. I remember laughing. At 13, 30 seemed impossibly far away. We wrote messages to our future selves and placed them in old jars. Most of those jars were probably still buried behind the house where I grew up. Or perhaps the new owners had found them and thrown them away. I continued digging until the hole was deep enough for the sunflower seeds. I opened one of the bags of fresh soil and poured part of it inside. Then I reached for the seed packet. As I tore it open, something in the loose earth caught my attention. A thin streak of pink lay beneath the dark soil. At first, I thought it was a piece of plastic or an old rag. The land had been empty before we built the house, and construction workers had left small pieces of trash everywhere. I nearly ignored it. Then the wind shifted the loose soil, revealing more of the material. My hand moved before I could stop it. I knelt and pulled gently. The fabric resisted. I brushed the earth away and uncovered a torn section of cloth. It was faded, dirty, and partly destroyed by time. Roots had grown through it. Small insects moved across the surface. Still, the color was visible. Pink, a-cold feeling spread through my chest. I knew that cloth. I had not seen it in 19 years, but I recognized it immediately. It came from the shirt Alex had been wearing on the day he disappeared. My hands began to shake. The seed packet fell beside the hole, scattering small black seeds across the dirt. For several seconds, I could not move. My son called to me from inside the house, but his voice sounded far away. The garden disappeared. The fence, the house, the tools, and the autumn morning faded around me. I was 13 again. whenever I thought about Alex's disappearance. Another story always returned with it. The legend of the Whispering Man. Every town has a frightening story adults pretend not to believe, and children repeat in quiet voices. In our town, that story belonged to the Whispering Man. People said he had once been a school teacher. No one could agree on his real name or exactly when he had lived. Some said it happened 100 years earlier. Others claimed he had taught at the old school before it burned down. According to the legend, the teacher became sick with a disease no doctor could cure. He grew thin, weak, and close to death. Then something visited him in the night. Some versions said it was a demon. Others said it was an old spirit from the forest. A few said it was death itself. Whatever the visitor was, it offered the teacher a bargain. He could survive, but once every year he would have to take a child into the woods and consume them. The teacher accepted. After that, children began disappearing. People searched the forest, but found nothing except small bones, torn clothing, and marks on the trees. At night, the woods were said to whisper, not with words. The sound was described as wet and soft, like something chewing in the darkness. That was how the teacher became known as the Whispering Man. Parents used the story to frighten children away from the forest. Stay near the road, or the Whispering Man will take you. Come home before dark, or he'll hear you. Never answer if someone whispers your name from between the trees. Alex and I loved the story. We pretended not to be afraid, but neither of us would walk through the woods alone after sunset. When Alex disappeared, the old legend returned. Some people mentioned it as a joke at first. Then, when the search failed, the joke became something more serious. Children whispered that the Whispering Man had taken Alex. Even some adults began repeating the story. No one truly admitted believing it. But belief is not always necessary. Sometimes a story only needs to be easier than the truth. I looked at the pink cloth in my hand and remembered everything. Alex and I had been friends for most of our childhood. We lived only a few streets apart, but our families were very different. My parents were relaxed. As long as I completed my homework and returned before dark, they allowed me to spend most afternoons outside. Alex's parents were strict. They wanted him to study constantly. They planned every hour of his day. After school, he was expected to finish homework, practice mathematics, read, and prepare for the next day. They rarely allowed him to play. That was why he had climbed through his bedroom window that Tuesday afternoon. His parents had gone to visit relatives. They believed Alex was inside studying. Instead, he found me near the edge of the woods. He wore a pink shirt, blue jeans, and old white shoes. "Let's play hide and seek," he said. I remember telling him the shirt would make him easy to find. He said it would not matter because I was terrible at seeking. We argued about the boundaries. I said we could hide near the houses and along the first line of trees, but we were not allowed to go deep into the woods. Alex agreed. At least, I thought he did. It was my turn to count. I covered my eyes against the side of a tree and began. 1, 2, 3. Alex's footsteps moved away behind me. By the time I reached 20, I could no longer hear him. I counted all the way to 100. Then I turned. The afternoon was quiet. I searched behind trees, bushes, sheds, and garden walls. I checked the old drainage pipe where we sometimes hid. I looked beneath the wooden steps behind an abandoned house. Alex was nowhere. At first, I thought he was playing a joke. He often found a good hiding place, and stayed there long after I called his name. "Alex, you win," I shouted. "Come out." There was no answer. I searched again. The sun moved lower. Shadows stretched across the ground. I began to worry. I walked toward his house, thinking he might have become scared and gone home. His bedroom window was still open. He was not inside. I returned to the game area and called his name again. Nothing. That was when I looked toward the woods. We had agreed not to go far beyond the first trees. But Alex loved breaking rules when his parents were not around. I told myself he was hiding deeper inside, waiting for me to become frightened. I entered the forest. The air felt colder beneath the trees. Leaves cracked under my shoes. Branches caught my shirt. I called Alex's name every few steps. No answer came. Then I saw one of his white shoes. It lay beside an old stone structure hidden beneath vines and leaves. Most people had forgotten the structure was there. It had once been part of a building, perhaps a small house or storage shed. Only a few broken steps and part of a wall remained. "Alex?" I moved around the stones. He was lying at the bottom of the steps. At first, I thought he was pretending. "Very funny," I said. He did not move. I climbed down. There was blood near his head. His eyes were partly open, and his face looked strangely empty. I touched his shoulder. "Alex?" His body moved slightly beneath my hand, but only because I had pushed it. I checked for breathing the way I had seen people do on television. I placed my ear near his mouth. I pressed 2 fingers against his neck. I felt nothing. He had fallen from the broken step and struck his head against the stone. Alex was dead. I fell apart. I called his name again and again. I shook him. I begged him to wake up. For a moment, I thought about running for help. Then the questions entered my mind. Why were you in the woods? Why did you let him come here? Why didn't you watch him? Why didn't you call an adult sooner? What did you do to him? His parents would know he had escaped to meet me. My parents would be furious. The police might think I pushed him. I imagined being taken away. I imagined adults staring at me and deciding I was responsible. I was 13 years old. I did not think like an adult. I thought like a frightened child who believed one terrible mistake could be hidden if no one saw it. There was a flat stone near the broken wall. I used it to loosen the soil. When that became too difficult, I used my hands. I dug until my fingers bled. The hole was shallow, but I convinced myself it was enough. I dragged Alex toward it. He was heavier than I expected. His head moved from side to side as I pulled him. I kept apologizing, though I do not know whether I said the words aloud. I placed my best friend in the ground. His pink shirt looked too bright against the dark soil. I covered him with dirt, leaves, and branches. Then I went home. My mother asked why my clothes were dirty. I told her I had fallen. Later that evening, Alex's parents came to our door. They asked if I had seen him. I lied. I said I had not seen Alex since school. The police investigation began that night. Search parties moved through the streets and woods. Officers questioned neighbors. Volunteers placed posters on walls and shop windows. Alex's face appeared in newspapers. His parents stood in front of cameras and begged anyone with information to come forward. I remained silent. Search teams entered the woods, but they never found the grave. Perhaps they did not go deep enough. Perhaps the leaves and fallen branches hid it. Or perhaps they were searching for a missing child, not a body buried by another child. Days became weeks. The town needed an explanation. That was when people began talking about the Whispering Man. At first, I hated the story. Then, I needed it. Whenever someone said the Whispering Man had taken Alex, I allowed myself to believe it for a few seconds. It was easier to imagine a monster in the woods than to remember my bleeding fingers pushing soil over my friend's face. Over time, the legend settled over the truth like a thick blanket. I stopped correcting people. Eventually, even inside my own mind, the lie began to feel real. I told myself Alex had vanished. I told myself I had searched for him. I told myself I had no idea where he had gone. Years passed. The old part of the forest was eventually put up for sale. When I heard about it, I bought the land without thinking. I told everyone I wanted privacy and space for a family home. The truth was simpler. I could not allow anyone else to own the ground. I could not allow construction workers, hikers, or children to discover what I had hidden. I built my house over part of the woods. I designed the garden myself. The grave was supposed to remain beneath the far corner of the property, untouched and forgotten. But soil moves, roots spread, rain washes things upward. And now, 19 years later, Alex's shirt had returned to the surface. My son called again. "Papa, I'm hungry." His voice pulled me back into the present. I looked down at the hole. More pink cloth remained beneath the soil. I could see something pale beside it. A small curve. Bone, I covered it quickly. I pushed the fresh soil over the cloth and pressed it down with the shovel. Then I picked up the scattered sunflower seeds and threw them into the hole. My hands shook so badly that half of them landed outside. I filled the hole and stepped on the earth until it looked flat. The flowers would grow there. Their roots would spread through the soil, through Alex. I left the tools beside the fence and went inside. My son sat on the mat, building another tower. "What do you want for lunch?" I asked. "Cheese? With bread?" "No bread." "You need bread." He made a face, and for one terrible moment, his expression reminded me of Alex. I went into the kitchen and prepared a small plate of cheese, fruit, and crackers. My hands continued shaking. I had to grip the counter several times to steady myself. The house seemed too quiet. I imagined hearing scratching beneath the floor, then whispering, a soft, wet sound moving through the walls. I told myself it was only the wind against the branches. When I returned to the living room, my son looked up. "Papa," he said, "why were you digging so long?" I forced myself to smile. "Planting sunflowers." He nodded as if that explained everything. I placed the plate beside him. He began eating with his small, clumsy fingers. I watched him. He trusted me completely. He did not know about Alex. He did not know about the grave. He did not know that the house where he slept, played, and dreamed had been built to protect a lie. Most of all, he did not know what lay beneath his feet. That night, after my wife and son went to sleep, I returned to the garden. I carried the shovel and a flashlight. For several minutes, I stood above the patch of fresh soil. I knew what I had to do. I needed to dig up the remains and move them before anyone else found them. I needed to take Alex somewhere far away, somewhere no one would connect to me. But I could not force the shovel into the ground. From somewhere beneath the soil, I heard a sound. A whisper. At first, I thought it was only leaves moving in the wind. Then, I heard my name. The voice was quiet and young, exactly as I remembered it. I dropped the flashlight. The beam rolled across the ground and stopped on the place where I had planted the seeds. The soil moved, only slightly, as if something underneath had taken a breath. I ran back inside and locked the door. The following morning, a sunflower had grown in the corner of the garden. It should have been impossible. I had planted the seeds less than 12 hours earlier, yet the flower stood taller than my son, its thick green stem rising from the fresh soil. Its yellow petals faced the house. At the center of the flower, where the seeds should have been, there was a dark shape that almost looked like a face. My son pressed his hands against the glass. "Pretty," he said. I could not answer. The flower turned slowly. There was no wind. Its dark center moved away from me and faced my son. Then, from beneath the floor, something began to whisper. Story 2. Nobody really prepares you for parenthood. People like to say they do. There are books, classes, videos, and entire websites dedicated to raising children. Everyone seems to have advice. Feed them this. Never let them watch that. Read to them every night. Keep a routine. Be patient. Stay calm. Make sure they feel safe. It all sounds simple when the child is only an idea. Then you have a real little girl standing in front of you, looking up with frightened eyes. And suddenly, none of the advice seems useful. You start wondering whether you are doing anything right. I have been raising my daughter alone for almost 8 years. It has never been easy. I handle everything myself. I prepare her meals, wash her clothes, help her bathe, and make sure she brushes her teeth. I teach her reading, writing, and basic mathematics at the kitchen table. I choose the books she studies and create lessons from whatever materials I can find. At night, I sit beside her bed until she falls asleep. Sometimes, she refuses to close her eyes unless I stay in the room. Other nights, she turns her face toward the wall and pretends I am not there. Being a parent takes more energy than anyone admits. There are mornings when I wake up feeling as though I never slept. There are evenings when I want 5 minutes of silence, but she keeps asking questions. There are days when she will not eat what I make, no matter how much time I spent preparing it. Still, I take pride in what I have done. I have kept her healthy. I have protected her. I have given her a home. There are moments when I wish things had happened differently. Sometimes I imagine what it would have been like to raise her with someone else beside me. A woman who understood the things I did not. Someone who could explain the changes that will soon happen to her body. Someone who could brush her hair without pulling too hard. But most of the time, I am proud that I have managed alone. At least I used to be. Raising her was easier when she was small. Babies need a great deal of care, but their needs are simple. They cry when they are hungry, tired, cold, or uncomfortable. If you solve the problem, they usually calm down. I learned quickly. I became good at warming milk. I learned how to hold her so she would stop crying. I watched videos about changing diapers and dealing with fevers. I stayed awake beside her whenever she became sick. She used to hold my finger in her tiny hand. That is one of my favorite memories. Her fingers were so small that they could barely close around mine, but she held on with surprising strength. Back then, she needed me for everything. She did not question where we lived or why it was only the two of us. She did not ask about her mother. As she grew older, things became more complicated. There are certain things a little girl needs a mother for. I do my best, but I am aware of my limits. I buy her things I think girls her age should like. dolls with soft hair, stuffed animals, small plastic tea sets, coloring books filled with princesses and fairies. When she was younger, she played with them. She would sit on the floor and arrange her stuffed animals in a circle. She gave each one a name and poured imaginary tea into tiny cups. Sometimes she invited me to join her. I always did. I sat on the floor, held a plastic cup, and pretended to drink. Those were good days. Now, most of the toys remain untouched. The dolls sit on a shelf in her room with their painted eyes facing forward. Dust gathers on the tea set. The stuffed animals stay inside a wooden chest unless I take them out myself. She says she is too old for them. I do not know what girls her age are supposed to enjoy. Most parents could ask other parents. I cannot. The older she gets, the more often she asks about her mother. At first, the questions were simple. Where is Mommy? I told her that her mother was far away. Then she asked when her mother would return. I said I did not know. She accepted those answers when she was 4. At 5, she began asking why her mother had left. I told her it was complicated. At 6, she wanted to know her mother's name. I changed the subject. Now she asks questions almost every day. When can I see her? Why doesn't she call? Does she know where I am? Does she miss me? That last question is the hardest. I always tell her yes. I tell her that of course her mother misses her. Any mother would miss a daughter like her. She stares at me afterward as if she knows there is something I am not saying. I've always found it strange that she misses someone she cannot possibly remember. She was only a baby when they were separated, no more than a few months old. There is no way she could remember her mother's face or voice. And yet, sometimes, she says she dreams about a woman singing. She cannot remember the words, but she claims the song makes her feel safe. She once described the woman as having long brown hair and a small mark beside her eye. I asked where she had heard that. She said she did not know. For several nights after that, I barely slept. Lately, she has started asking other questions, too. Questions about the house. Questions about the locks. Questions about why she is not allowed outside. Why don't I go to a real school? Why can't I play with other children? Why are the curtains always closed? Why is there a lock on the outside of my bedroom door? I explain that the world is dangerous. I tell her there are people who hurt children. That part is true. I tell her that keeping her inside is the only way to protect her. She does not believe me anymore. A few weeks ago, she asked why all the doors have locks near the top, where she cannot reach them. I told her it was because she used to wander when she was younger. She said she does not remember doing that. I reminded her that children forget many things. She looked directly at me and said, "You forget things too." I did not like the way she said it. She has become distant. When I enter a room, she sometimes stops talking, even if she was only speaking to herself. She hides small pieces of paper beneath her mattress. Once, I found a picture she had drawn of our house. In the drawing, every window had black bars over it. There was a little girl standing inside. Outside the house, a woman was reaching toward her. A man stood behind the girl. He had no face. I asked her what the picture meant. She tore it in half and refused to speak to me for the rest of the day. She is almost 8 now. At least, I believe she is. I never knew her exact date of birth. I chose a birthday for her based on how old she looked when I found her. Every year, I bake a cake and give her presents on that date. She used to enjoy it. Last year, she asked how I knew when she had been born. I told her I remembered. She asked whether I had been there. I said yes, without thinking. Then she asked why there were no photographs of her as a newborn. I told her the photographs had been lost. She did not ask anything else, but I could tell she did not believe me. This is not something I can say I planned for. When I took her, it was an impulse. I wish I could explain it in a way that made sense. For most of my life, I had wanted a family. I wanted a wife, a house, and children running through the rooms. I imagined teaching a son how to repair things or reading stories to a daughter before bed. But I was never good with women. I became nervous around them. I said the wrong things. I either spoke too much or not enough. The few dates I had ended badly. One woman told me I made her uncomfortable because I stared too much. Another said I became serious too quickly. She laughed when I mentioned children on our second date. After that, I stopped trying. But the desire to have a family did not disappear. It grew. Every time I saw a father carrying his child on his shoulders, I felt angry. Whenever I passed families eating together in restaurants, I wondered why they had been given something I could never have. I told myself I would meet the right woman eventually. Years passed. Nothing changed. The loneliness became harder to live with. I began collecting things for the family I imagined. A wooden crib from a second-hand shop. Boxes of children's books. Small clothes that were on sale. At first, I knew it was strange. Then it began to feel like preparation. I convinced myself that if I built a life for a child, somehow a child would come into it. The spare bedroom became a nursery. I painted the walls pale yellow. I placed the crib near the window and filled the shelves with toys. Sometimes I stood in the doorway and imagined hearing a baby crying. Then one afternoon, I went to the park. I had no reason to be there. I was driving home from work and saw families gathered around the playground. Children ran between the swings and slides while parents sat on benches, looking at their phones or talking to one another. I parked across the road. I watched for a while. Then I saw her. She was lying in a stroller near a bench. A blanket covered most of her body. Only her small face and one hand were visible. A woman had been sitting beside the stroller, but she stood and hurried toward an older child who had fallen near the climbing frame. For a few moments, the baby was unattended. It felt as if everything around me became quiet. I remember getting out of my car. I remember crossing the road. After that, it is difficult to explain. My body seemed to act before my mind could stop it. I walked to the stroller. The baby looked up at me. Her eyes were wide and dark. She did not cry. That felt important at the time. I thought perhaps she knew I would care for her. I lifted her from the stroller and carried her to my car. Someone shouted behind me as I opened the door. I placed her inside and drove away. I did not look back. For the first few hours, I told myself I was only taking her somewhere safe. I said I would return her once I had calmed down. Then I reached home and carried her into the nursery I had prepared. Everything fit. The crib, the blankets, the bottles. It felt as though the room had been waiting for her. That night, the news showed photographs from the park. They showed her mother crying. Police officers searched the area. People were asked to check their cameras and report anything suspicious. I turned off the television. The baby began crying in the next room. I went to her. After a few days, returning her became more difficult. After a few weeks, it felt impossible. I kept thinking about what would happen to me if I brought her back. I would be arrested. Everyone would call me a monster. And I loved her. At least, I believed I did. I wanted to give her the life I had always dreamed of providing. So I changed my routines. I left my job and found work I could do from home. I covered the windows. I stopped speaking to neighbors. I ordered supplies whenever possible and only left the house late at night. As she grew, I taught her that the outside world was dangerous. I told her she had been very sick as a baby and could not be around other people. At first, she believed everything. Children trust the people who raise them. That trust was a beautiful thing. Now, it is gone. She watches me carefully. Sometimes, when I walk past her room at night, I hear her whispering. I once stood outside the door and listened. She was repeating an address. I do not know where she learned it. It was not our address. I wrote it down and searched for it online. The address belonged to a house nearly 3 hours away. A woman lived there, the same woman I had seen crying on television all those years ago. Her mother. I stared at the screen for a long time. The woman had never stopped searching. Her social media pages were filled with old photographs, missing child posters, and yearly messages written on her daughter's birthday. Her real birthday, not the date I had chosen. The woman had also posted computer-generated images showing what her daughter might look like at different ages. The most recent one looked uncomfortably close. I closed the page and cleared the browsing history. I still do not know how my daughter found the address. Maybe I forgot to lock the computer. Maybe she heard something on the television years ago. Maybe she remembers more than I thought possible. Since then, she has become afraid of me. She flinches when I move too quickly. She has begun pushing furniture against her bedroom door at night, even though I can unlock it from the outside. Once, during an argument, she called me by my first name. Not Dad. She called me Martin. I had never told her that name. I asked where she heard it. She said she had seen it on one of my old letters. I searched her room afterward. I found a small bag hidden beneath a loose floorboard. Inside were crackers, a bottle of water, a screwdriver, and a hand-drawn map of the house. She was planning to escape. That realization broke something inside me. I have given her everything. Food, shelter, education, love. I stayed awake when she was sick. I held her when she cried. I taught her to read. I celebrated every birthday. And she wants to leave me. Part of me knows why. Another part thinks she is being ungrateful. I hate myself for thinking that. I know she never asked for this life. She never chose me. The more honest I become with myself, the worse it feels. Sometimes I consider taking her back. I imagine driving to her mother's house in the middle of the night. I could leave her near the front door, ring the bell, and drive away before anyone saw me. She would be safe. Her mother would recognize her. I used to tell myself that too much time had passed. I said the woman would not know her anymore. But that is not true. A mother would know. She would recognize the shape of her daughter's eyes, the small mark near her ear, and the way she presses her lips together when she is frightened. She would know immediately. That thought terrifies me. Not because I think the woman would reject her, because I know she would accept her. My daughter might run into her arms and never look back at me. 8 years could disappear in one moment. All the meals, lessons, bedtime stories, and birthdays would mean nothing. I would become only the man who took her. Maybe that is all I have ever been. I do not know. There are too many feelings inside me, and none of them agree. I love her. I resent her. I want her to be happy. I want her to stay. I know keeping her here is wrong. I also know I cannot imagine this house without her. Yesterday, she asked me directly whether I was her real father. I told her of course I was. She asked why we did not have the same last name on an old document she found. I said the document was fake. Then she asked why I had been watching videos about missing children. I lost my temper. I shouted louder than I ever had before. She backed into the wall and raised her arms to protect her face. I had never hit her. I told her that. She said, "Not yet." Those 2 words have stayed with me. Not yet. She thinks I will hurt her. Maybe fear makes children imagine things. Or maybe she sees something in me that I do not. Afterward, I apologized. I brought her dinner and placed it outside her door. She did not eat. This morning, she asked when her mother was coming back. I told her to stop asking. She said, "She's looking for me." I asked how she knew. She would not answer. She only smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who knows something. I checked every window and door afterward. Nothing had been opened. Still, I cannot shake the feeling that she has found a way to contact someone. Perhaps she has been sending messages through the computer. Perhaps she has hidden a phone. I searched her room again. I found nothing. I have started thinking about moving. There is an old property farther north where no one would ask questions. The nearest town is almost an hour away. We could start again. She would hate it at first. But children adjust. They always do. I could teach her more. There is still so much she does not know. She needs to learn how to cook properly, how to repair clothes, how to care for a house, and how to avoid dangerous people. I have spent years protecting her from the world. I cannot hand her back now and allow strangers to undo everything, even if one of those strangers is her mother. Sometimes, I stand outside my daughter's bedroom and listen to her breathing. It reminds me of when she was a baby. Back then, I used to place 2 fingers against her chest to make sure she was still alive. I was terrified something would happen to her while I slept. Now, when I listen, I sometimes hear the mattress creak. She is awake, too, waiting for me to leave. I wonder what she thinks about in the darkness. Does she remember the park? Does she remember the woman who ran after us? Does she remember being carried into my car? She should not. But perhaps some memories remain in the body, even when the mind is too young to understand them. Maybe that is why she never liked the sound of playgrounds on television. Maybe that is why she cries whenever she hears a woman singing the same lullaby. Maybe a part of her has always known. I have considered telling her the truth. I imagine sitting at the kitchen table and explaining everything. I would tell her I was lonely. I would tell her I saw her alone and believed I could give her a good life. I would ask her to understand that I never meant to hurt anyone. But I know how she would look at me. She would not see a father confessing a mistake. She would see a stranger admitting that he stole her. So I stay quiet. Maybe I will return her one day. Maybe when she is older, she will understand me better. Maybe she will see that I raised her because I loved her, even if the way it began was wrong. For now, I think I will keep her a little longer. Only a few more years. There is still so much I need to teach her. And by then, Perhaps she will stop trying to leave. Story 3. I was new to the area and still trying to learn which roads were safe for running. I had always enjoyed jogging, but the place I had moved to was much hillier than I expected. Some roads climbed so sharply that they were good for exercise, but they were also dangerous. Cars would come over the top of a hill without seeing me until the last second. That had already happened several times. On one occasion, a truck appeared over a hill so quickly that I had to jump into a ditch to avoid it. The driver never even slowed down. After that, I decided I needed to find somewhere flatter, straighter, and quieter. I checked Google Maps and searched local running groups on Meetup. Most of the suggested routes were either too far away or ran through busy neighborhoods. Eventually, I found a road not far from my new home that looked perfect. It was called Briar Road. The map showed a long, mostly straight road cutting through a large wooded area. There were few sharp turns and almost no steep hills. Houses were spread far apart, and traffic seemed very light. As a woman, I usually preferred quiet roads. Running beside busy streets often meant dealing with drivers slowing down, shouting through open windows, or staring as they passed. Once, I had been forced to use pepper spray on a man who followed me for almost half a mile. He kept calling for me to stop because he wanted to show me something. I had made it very clear that I was not interested. But he continued following me until I turned around and sprayed him. Since starting my new job would change my schedule, I expected to run around sunrise or sunset. Briar Road seemed like the perfect solution. It was quiet, flat, and hidden from most traffic. Then I searched for it on Meetup. I was surprised by how many people had mentioned the road. Most comments were vague. People simply said they would not run there again or recommended choosing another route. A few described strange experiences, although the stories sounded ridiculous. One person claimed they heard loud tribal drums coming from deep inside the woods. Another said they saw a deer watching from tall grass. The deer supposedly had 3 bright yellow eyes. The strangest review described Briar Road as being like the Bermuda Triangle. The runner claimed that time and direction did not work normally there. That was the comment that convinced me to ignore all the warnings. I had recently been hired to supervise a research and development team at a company that manufactured lenses. I had 2 master's degrees and had spent years working with science, measurements, and controlled testing. I did not believe in ghosts. I did not believe in monsters, UFOs, cursed roads, or mysterious triangles where the laws of nature stop working. In my opinion, those things were invented by bored people living in rural areas who wanted to make their town seem more interesting than it really was. So, on Friday morning, I decided to jog along Briar Road. Near the junction was a small historical marker with enough space beside it for 1 car. I parked there shortly before 7 in the morning. The weather was cold and damp. A thin layer of fog covered the road, and low gray clouds blocked most of the sunlight. It had rained the previous night, leaving the pavement wet. I wore a bright yellow running jacket, dark blue jogging trousers, and an orange sweatband. I had forgotten to charge my wireless earbuds, so I brought an older pair with wires and looped them around the sweatband to stop them from moving. I stretched beside the car, checked that my keys were secure, and began walking towards the start of the road. Once my muscles felt warm, I started running against traffic, as runners are supposed to do. The road was not maintained very well. The edges of the pavement had broken away in several places. Weeds grew through long cracks, and tree branches stretched close to the road. Thick poison ivy vines hung down from some of the trees, forcing me to stay farther inside the lane than I normally would. Because of the fog, I could not see very far ahead. The road seemed to follow a slight decline before bending gently to the left. Beyond that, I could only make out trees, bushes, and dark shapes in the mist. Birds called occasionally from somewhere above me. There were two houses near the entrance to Briar Road. Both were visible from the street, but neither looked occupied. Their paint was peeling, windows were dirty, and the gardens had grown wild. I passed them without giving them much thought. As I ran, I began thinking about my new job. I was supposed to start the following week. The position came with more responsibility than anything I had done before, and although I was excited, I was also nervous. The day after my run, one of my new coworkers had invited me to a small gathering at her home. Her name was Alicia. I had only met her twice, but she seemed warm, energetic, and extremely social. She had invited everyone from the lab to swim in her pool and have drinks in the backyard. I was looking forward to it. Moving to a new area had been lonely, and the gathering seemed like a good chance to make friends before starting work. I became lost in thought and stopped paying attention to the road. By the time I checked my distance, I had run almost a mile. I felt good. My heart rate was steady, my breathing was controlled, and I was fully awake. My right ankle hurt slightly because I had not run in nearly 2 weeks, but the pain was manageable. Then I reached a long bend. The fog suddenly became thicker. Within seconds, I could barely see more than 20 feet ahead. I slowed down and moved closer to the shoulder in case a driver approached without noticing me. As I emerged from the thickest part of the fog, another jogger appeared. The person rushed past me in the opposite direction. At first, I felt relieved. Seeing another runner made me feel as though I had been right to ignore the warnings. Briar Road was not haunted. It was simply a quiet place used by local joggers. Then I noticed the condition of the person. I could not tell whether they were a man or a woman. They wore a hooded jacket covered in mud. Their clothes were torn, and a long bloody scratch ran across one cheek. They waved both hands at me desperately. Their face was mostly hidden beneath the muddy hood, but I saw their mouth moving. As we passed each other, I pulled one earbud out. The sound that came from them was not normal. The voice was extremely high and fast. It sounded like a damaged cassette tape being played at the wrong speed. It reminded me of a cartoon voice stretched into a painful squeal. I could not understand a single word. The jogger disappeared into the fog behind me almost immediately. I stopped running. My heart suddenly beat much faster. I lowered both arms and turned around, expecting the person to reappear. There was only fog. I tried to understand what I had seen. Perhaps the runner had fallen in the woods. Maybe the strange voice came from an injury or some medical condition. Maybe my music had distorted the sound. My mind had been rewarding me for ignoring the superstitious stories. Now, it flooded my body with adrenaline. For several seconds, I could not decide whether to continue or return to my car. Eventually, pride won. I told myself the encounter had a reasonable explanation and started running again. The fog began thinning as I completed another mile. That was when I noticed something impossible. The sun had been rising on my left when I began the run. Now it seemed lower in the sky, almost hidden behind the trees. Long shadows stretched across the road as though evening were approaching. I continued running and tried not to panic. Maybe I had remembered the position of the sun incorrectly. Perhaps the clouds were making it appear lower. I repeated those explanations until they almost sounded believable. Then, my music stopped. I had been listening to an old Lady Gaga song when the sound disappeared in the middle of a line. I looked at the phone strapped to my upper arm. The screen would not turn on. As I pressed the button, I realized something else. I could not hear my footsteps. My shoes were clearly striking the pavement, but they made no sound. I pulled both earbuds out and listened carefully. Nothing. I could not hear my breathing either. I looked down to make sure my feet were touching the ground. They were. Then, music began playing from beneath them. Every time one foot struck the pavement, I heard part of the song. Lady Gaga's voice came from the road in the rhythm of my steps. I stopped. The music stopped too. I placed one earbud back into my left ear. Through the earbud, I heard the sound of my shoes hitting the road and air moving through my lungs. My actual footsteps and breathing had somehow moved into the earbud, while the music played from the road beneath me. I stood completely still. The world around me began to shimmer. Tiny points of light appeared in the air, making the fog sparkle like dust under bright sunlight. Then, everything changed again. The music returned to the earbud. My breathing came from my open ear. The sparkling lights floated upwards and disappeared. By then, I was genuinely terrified. I thought I might be having a stroke or seizure. I ripped the phone from its holder and tried to call an ambulance. The screen remained black. The phone appeared completely dead, yet music continued playing through the earbuds. Looking at the dark screen made me realize how much darker the road had become. I turned towards the left side of the forest. Only a thin line of orange and gold remained between the trees. It looked like sunset. I knew my car was around 3 miles behind me, parked near the historical marker. It should have been easy to reach. All I needed to do was turn around, follow the road, and return to the junction. Whether I was sick or trapped in some strange weather event, I needed to reach my car. I turned and began sprinting. This was not my normal running speed. I pushed myself as hard as I could. Almost immediately, I noticed the road ahead looked different. The land was hillier than I remembered. The trees were taller and closer together. The center lines on the road were gone. Metal guardrails now appeared beside several sections of the pavement. I did not remember seeing any of them before. I continued running while trying to convince myself that the fog had hidden those details earlier. Then the sun moved. It had been on my right after I turned around. As I watched, the final orange light drifted across the road and settled on my left side. The entire sky seemed to rotate. The movement made me feel sick, like spinning in circles with my eyes closed as a child. It appeared that the world had turned around me to keep me traveling in the same direction. I stopped again. I no longer knew where my car was. If the position of the sun could not be trusted and the road changed behind me, turning around meant nothing. After several moments, I turned again. I chose the direction that felt correct and forced myself back into a running rhythm. Then, a loud metallic noise came from behind me. I looked over my shoulder. The guardrails were pulling away from their wooden posts. Bolts snapped. Steel sections fell into the dirt. At first, I thought the metal had simply collapsed. Then it began to move. The long rails rolled through the mud like snakes. Steel twisted, bent, and curled into loops. Two sections rose into the air. Each stood between 15 and 20 feet tall. They shaped themselves into rough human forms. The ends of the rails touched the ground like thin feet, while the center curled into a large loop resembling a head. The metal groaned and screamed as it bent. Yellow reflector discs near the top of each rail rotated towards me. In the final light of the sunset, they looked like glowing amber eyes. Both creatures lowered their looped heads. They appeared angry that I was there. I turned and ran. I had never moved that fast in my life. Behind me, metal struck the road. The guardrail creatures followed, bending and pulling themselves forward. Their steel bodies scraped across the pavement with every step. I imagined what would happen if they caught me. Perhaps one would bend around my body and tighten like a snake. It might close its metal loop around my waist, neck, or head until something broke. I considered leaving the road and running into the forest. Poison ivy, three-eyed deer, and invisible drummers suddenly seemed less dangerous than the things chasing me. But another thought stopped me. Perhaps the guardrails wanted me to leave the road. Maybe something worse was waiting among the trees. The fog thickened again. I believed I was running in the correct direction and hoped the mist might hide me from the creatures. Then, two bright headlights appeared directly ahead. They blinded me. I jumped towards the muddy shoulder. My foot slipped. I fell hard, striking my face against a broken piece of pavement. Pain exploded through my cheek. When I touched it, warm blood covered my fingers. I rolled over and looked towards the road. Something like a large black cube moved through the fog. It had two brilliant headlights, but no visible wheels, windows, or body shape. It seemed to float just above the road. The cube struck the guardrail creatures. Their bodies immediately straightened and unraveled. The metal rolled back towards the roadside and reattached itself to the wooden posts. The black shape continued forward. Then it drifted off the road. It passed through the trees as though they were not solid and disappeared into the forest. For several seconds, I remained in the mud. My knee burned whenever I moved it. Blood ran from the cut on my cheek, and my clothes were soaked and dirty. Night had almost completely fallen. The temperature dropped quickly. I pulled my hood over my head with muddy hands and forced myself to stand. There was nothing else I could do except continue moving. I checked my phone again. The screen was no longer empty. It showed my face. At first, I thought the front camera had activated. The image followed my movements, but something about it looked wrong. A thin line traced around my face. Then, the cut on my cheek opened wider. Blood poured from it. In the image, the skin on my face began peeling away. It pulled loose from my skull as though the blood were dragging it off. My cheeks disappeared first. Then, my lips and ears tore away. The screen showed gray-red muscle, exposed teeth, and bulging eyes. I screamed and nearly threw the phone into the woods. Somehow, I stopped myself. I left it strapped to my arm and continued running. The fog became thick enough to hide most of the road. Pain from my knee and face grew worse. I tried to move faster, hoping fear would keep my body from giving up. A human figure appeared ahead. It looked like a woman running towards me. Tears and sweat had collected beneath my headband, making it difficult to see, but she appeared normal. I waved both arms, turned back. I shouted, "Please, stop. You need to help me." We passed each other. The woman wore a bright yellow jacket, dark blue trousers, and an orange sweatband. Her clothes were clean. Her face was not injured. For 1 second, I saw shock in her eyes. Then she disappeared into the fog behind me. I stopped breathing. It was me. I had just passed myself from earlier that morning. I remembered the muddy runner who waved at me. I remembered the bloody scratch on the cheek and the high, broken voice. That person had been me too. I had tried to warn myself, but the road had twisted my voice until I could not understand it. I considered turning around. Perhaps I could follow my earlier self and prevent her from continuing. Before I could decide, another strange event began. The fog suddenly lifted. Water on the road formed into small beads, as though the pavement had become oil and was pushing the moisture away. The droplets rose into the air. Rainwater lifted from the ground, traveling upwards in thin streams. It looked as though invisible hooks had caught every drop and pulled it back towards the clouds. As the reverse rain cleared, I saw the junction ahead. My car was less than 500 feet away. The sun was rising above the trees exactly as it had when I began the run. Despite the pain in my knee and the blood on my face, I sprinted the remaining distance. I remember reaching the car, but everything after that became unclear. I do not remember opening the door. I do not remember putting the key into the ignition. I barely remember driving away. The short trip home passed like a dream. I did not want to stay alone in my house. I needed to be somewhere public, surrounded by normal people and familiar sounds. I grabbed a clean jacket and my laptop, then drove to a Starbucks in Little Fort. The baristas stared when I entered. I must have looked terrible. My hair was wet, my face was cut, and mud covered my trousers and shoes. I wore the clean jacket over the dirty clothes, but it did not hide much. I ordered coffee, sat near a window, opened my laptop, and began writing everything down on Meetup. The employees kept looking towards my table. They probably thought I was high or experiencing some kind of breakdown. My foot tapped constantly against the metal table stand. As the caffeine entered my system and the quiet familiarity of the caf began calming me, I noticed the date on my laptop. Sunday, 9 in the morning. I stared at the calendar. That could not be right. I had begun my run at around 7 on Friday morning. I checked an online calendar. Sunday, I searched the date on Google. The result was the same. Only then did I remember that I had not looked at my phone since seeing the image of my face being torn apart. It was still strapped beneath my clean jacket. I almost asked one of the baristas what day it was. Then I realized how I would sound. They already suspected I was unstable. Asking what day it was might convince them to remove me from the caf. Instead, I took out the phone. The screen was black. When I pressed the power button, it turned on normally. The home screen confirmed the date. It was Sunday. I had been on Briar Road for 2 full days. As the phone reconnected to the mobile network, notifications appeared one after another. There were several missed calls and 5 voicemails. 4 were from Alicia. In the first message, she asked whether I was still coming to the pool party. The second sounded worried. The third asked me to call her because no one from work had heard from me. Her final message had been recorded around 1 in the morning on Sunday. She sounded tired, disappointed, and concerned. The 5th voicemail came from an unknown number. There was no voice. Only drums. They started quietly, then became louder and faster until I ended the message. I did not know who to call or what explanation I could possibly give. Eventually, I called Alicia. When she answered, I immediately began apologizing. I spoke too quickly, trying to explain why I had missed the party without describing everything that happened. I said I had gone running. She interrupted me. "Where did you go?" I hesitated before answering. "Briar Road." Alicia became silent. Then she told me the same thing the meetup comments had warned me about. Something controls that road. She did not know what it was. No one did. But it did not obey normal time, direction, sound, or distance. Most importantly, it did not like trespassers. I used to believe stories about haunted roads were created by bored, uneducated people. I believed ghosts, monsters, and places like the Bermuda Triangle were nonsense. None of that matters now. You do not need to believe my story. You can decide I suffered a head injury, got lost in the fog, or experienced some kind of hallucination. You can create any explanation that makes you feel safe. Just take my advice. Do not jog on Briar Road. Story 4. Before I begin, you are probably wondering why I am giving you advice. Why would someone like me tell you how to stay alive? The answer is simple. You have all become far too easy. There used to be some excitement in what I did. People were more careful. They asked questions. They watched the road behind them. They noticed when a stranger appeared more than once in the same place. Sometimes they even fought back. Now, most of you practically volunteer. You post your location online. You meet complete strangers in empty places. You climb into cars without checking who is driving. You share your schedules, your workplaces, your favorite bars, your family's names, and pictures of the inside of your homes. Then, when something terrible happens, everyone acts surprised. I do not kill people simply because it is easy. If that was all I wanted, I would go back to hunting rabbits. Rabbits are predictable. They run when they sense danger. They do not stand around worrying that escaping might seem rude. People are supposed to be more interesting. You have imagination. You have instincts. You have the ability to notice danger and make choices. At least, that is what I used to believe. Lately, I have begun to wonder whether most of you are trying to get yourselves killed. So I am going to help. Think of this as advice from a professional. I know that sounds arrogant, but I have earned the right to say it. I have been doing this for a long time, and I am still here. You are reading my words. The people who ignored these lessons are not. I want you to become more difficult. I want you to make me work for it. A game is only interesting when both sides understand that they are playing. Let us begin with online dating. Stop treating strangers on the internet as if they have already passed some kind of test. I understand why people use those apps. Life is lonely. Work takes up most of the day. Friends get married, move away, or become too busy. You look around one evening and realize everyone else seems to have someone waiting for them. You want that too. There is nothing wrong with wanting company. What is wrong is the speed at which you trust someone because you like their photographs. A few messages are exchanged. Maybe they make you laugh. Maybe they mention a band you like, or a place you visited. Suddenly, you feel as though you have known them for months. You have not. You know a collection of sentences they chose to send you. People can create any personality they want through a screen. They can be charming, sensitive, funny, successful, and kind. They can become exactly the person you are hoping to meet. You do half the work for them. You place your loneliness in front of them, and they shape themselves around it. Years ago, I used speed dating events to find easy targets. Those places were useful because people arrived expecting to speak to strangers. No one questioned why someone they had never seen before was asking personal questions. Now I do not even need to leave my home. You announce that you are available. You describe what you like. You tell the world what kind of person you want. Then you agree to meet someone you know only through a photograph that may not even belong to them. Sometimes you invite them directly to your home. Sometimes you go to theirs. You tell yourself it is exciting, spontaneous, modern. I call it convenient. Meet in public. Stay in public. Do not let a pleasant conversation convince you that the person across from you is safe. And never go to a second location. I can already hear the arguments. You might say the first place is closing. You might say the restaurant is crowded. You might say they know a better club, a quieter bar, a beautiful view, or a private place where you can talk. No, there is almost no reason good enough to leave the place you originally agreed to meet and follow a stranger somewhere else. You plan to watch a film? Watch the film. You plan to have dinner? Eat your dinner. You plan to meet for coffee? Finish the coffee, say goodnight, and go home. Make plans for another day when you have had time to think clearly. You do not need to prove that you are adventurous. You do not need to worry that the other person will think you are boring. Anyone worth seeing again will respect your caution. Anyone who becomes angry because you refuse to follow them somewhere private has just given you the most useful information you could possibly receive. Listen to it. You would be amazed by how often someone agrees to leave a busy place simply because the stranger asking seems confident. Confidence is powerful. People mistake it for honesty. I have told people about private parties that did not exist. I have mentioned restaurants that were supposedly better than the one we were already sitting in. I have claimed that friends were waiting nearby. The exact story never mattered. What mattered was how I told it. I smiled. I acted relaxed. I made the suggestion sound ordinary. Most people are terrified of appearing nervous, suspicious, or rude. They would rather enter an unknown car than say, "No, I do not trust you yet." That brings me to something else you need to understand. Charisma does not mean safety. A charming person can still be dangerous. A beautiful face can hide bad intentions. A calm voice can lie. You would think people had learned this by now. History is full of men and women who smiled their way into the lives of their victims. They did not always look frightening. They did not walk around covered in blood. Many of them looked normal. Some were considered attractive. Some had families, friends, jobs, and good reputations. That is why they succeeded. Danger rarely introduces itself by saying, "Hello, I intend to hurt you." It asks for help. It tells you a sad story. It carries a broken box, wears a medical bandage, or says its pet is missing. It makes you feel helpful and good. I sometimes wonder how many adults would still follow a stranger because he claimed to have lost his dog. Not all of you, of course, but enough. Far too many. You warn children not to approach suspicious vans, yet adults walk willingly into dangerous situations because the person inviting them is polite. Maybe the van did not have enough candy when you were young. Maybe the lesson never stayed with you. Until someone earns your trust, you should accept that they may be trying to gain something from you. For one person, it might be money. For another, it might be access to your accounts. For me, it would be something worse. The method changes, but the lie is the same. We both look you in the eye and pretend we have harmless intentions. That is what annoys me most. I barely have to lie anymore. Sometimes all I need to do is listen. People reveal everything when they believe someone finds them attractive. They talk about their broken relationships, their empty houses, their work schedules, and the friends who never called them. Maybe loneliness is the reason. Maybe it is my face. I prefer to believe I am simply very handsome. Either way, stop making it so easy. You should also carry something useful for protection. Too many people depend entirely on pepper spray. Pepper spray is better than nothing, but some of you hold it like a magical object that will solve every problem. You place it at the bottom of a bag, beneath your wallet, makeup, receipts, headphones, and keys. By the time you find it, the danger is already close. Even when it works, it may not work the way you imagined. Wind exists, panic exists, bad aim exists. An attacker may also be prepared for pain. The most important thing is not the object itself. It is whether you can reach it, use it, and escape. Too many people buy something for self-defense and never think about it again. The purchase makes them feel safer, so they stop being careful. Safety is not something you can buy and forget. It is a habit. Look around when you walk. Keep your hands free when possible. Know where the exits are. Do not wear headphones so loudly that you cannot hear someone following you. And understand that a weapon you are afraid to use may become someone else's weapon. People enjoy repeating the phrase that there is no better kill than overkill. I have always found that saying honest. Violence does not follow the fair rules you imagine while watching films. There is no polite back and forth. There is no guarantee that a warning will stop someone. Real fear is confused, ugly, and fast. Your best defense is usually avoiding the situation before it begins. That means protecting your personal information. Personal information should remain personal. I should not know enough about you to steal your identity after one conversation. I should not know your full name, workplace, birthday, address, mother's name, pet's name, and favorite childhood memory because I spent 15 minutes looking through your public profile. Yet I often can. People post photographs in front of their homes with the house number clearly visible. They take pictures of work badges. They celebrate birthdays publicly and mention the exact year they were born. They answer harmless-looking online questions about their first car, childhood street, favorite teacher, or the name of their first pet. Then, they use those same answers as security questions. You make information available because you believe only friends are looking. Strangers are looking too. Some of them want to sell you something. Some want to rob you. Some are simply curious. And some are like me. Stop announcing where you are while you are still there. A photograph from a restaurant can wait until you get home. A picture from your vacation can be posted after you return. You do not need to tell hundreds of people that your house is empty or that you are standing alone beside a road at night. A killer who preferred attacking random people from a car would not need to search very hard anymore. You would send him directions. There is one exception to keeping your location private. Tell people you trust where you are. Tell a friend. Tell a family member. Send them the address. Share the name of the person you are meeting. Give them a time when you expect to return. Arrange for someone to call you. It may feel dramatic. You may worry that you are acting paranoid. Be paranoid. Paranoid people are inconvenient targets. There is nothing more disappointing than making someone disappear and realizing no one is looking for them. I am good at what I do. Very good. Television killers would look like careless amateurs beside me. They leave patterns, trophies, blood, witnesses, and endless clues. They become emotional. They want attention. I prefer quiet. But even careful work becomes pointless when no one notices the victim is missing. Why put in all that effort if no one cares enough to call? The world is full of lonely people whose absence might not be discovered for days. Some live alone. Some have stopped speaking to family. Some work jobs where no one notices whether they arrive. They are the easiest to take. That should frighten you more than anything else I have said. Build connections. Not because friendship is a magical shield, but because someone should notice when you vanish. Make sure there is at least one person who expects to hear from you. Do not let pride convince you that needing others is weakness. Isolation is useful to people like me. So is false knowledge. That is why I suggest you stop believing true crime programs have made you an expert. You watch documentaries, memorize famous cases, and begin thinking you understand killers. You do not. Most of the famous ones were not brilliant. They were careless and fortunate. They operated during times when police departments did not communicate properly. Evidence was lost. Victims were ignored. Witnesses were dismissed. They continued because the systems meant to stop them failed. People watch those stories and focus on the killer's habits, childhood, clothes, or favorite method. They imagine that remembering those details will help them identify the next dangerous person they meet. Real danger will not arrive wearing a label. The next killer will not necessarily behave like a famous one. He may not collect souvenirs. He may not follow a pattern. He may not target the same type of person each time. He may have watched the same documentaries you did. You cannot protect yourself by memorizing the mistakes of people who were eventually caught. Many of those criminals practically announced what they were doing, and still no one stopped them for years. Police failed to listen. Neighbors ignored strange sounds. Families were told to wait. Victims were treated as though their lives mattered less. That is the real lesson. Do not assume someone else will notice danger for you. Do not assume authority always understands what is happening. If something feels wrong, act before you have perfect proof. Some famous killers anger me more than others, especially those who blame their violence on shame, desire, or the inability to accept themselves. Your personal confusion does not excuse cruelty. Plenty of people struggle with identity without hurting anyone. A monster is still responsible for choosing to become one. Do not allow a documentary to turn that choice into a mystery so complicated that you forget the victims. And finally, trust your instincts. I hate admitting that. Every safety article says it. Every police officer says it. Every parent says it. It sounds boring because you have heard it so often. But they are right. Every person I have killed knew something was wrong. Every single one. Sometimes they felt it the moment they saw me. Sometimes it happened when I changed the plan. Sometimes it came when the street became too quiet, or when they noticed I had locked a door. Their bodies understood before their minds did. Their hearts beat faster. Their stomachs tightened. The skin on their arms rose. A voice inside them said, "Leave," then another voice answered. It said they were overreacting. It said they were being unfair. It said they would look foolish. It said I seemed nice. They worried about offending me. Imagine that. They sensed death standing beside them, and they were more concerned about appearing rude. That is how powerful social rules are. You have been trained to smile, apologize, and give people the benefit of the doubt. Those are useful habits in a safe room. They are dangerous habits when your instincts are screaming. You do not owe politeness to someone who frightens you. You do not owe an explanation. You do not need enough evidence to convince a courtroom. Leave, cross the street, enter a crowded shop, call someone, make noise, embarrass yourself. I promise embarrassment feels better than dying. A woman once apologized to me while trying to pull away. Think about that. She knew I was holding her too tightly. She knew my expression had changed. She knew there was no innocent reason for what was happening. Still, she said she was sorry. She thought perhaps she had misunderstood. She had not. You usually have only a small amount of time between suspicion and certainty. Use it. Do not wait for the dangerous person to prove you right. By then, you may no longer have a choice. Write these lessons down if you need to. Meet strangers in public and stay there. Do not follow them to another location. Do not mistake charm for goodness. Think seriously about how you would protect yourself. Keep private information private. Make sure trusted people know where you are. Do not confuse entertainment with real preparation. And listen when your body tells you to run. I am begging you, not because I care about you. Do not misunderstand me. I have no interest in becoming a better person. I do not regret what I have done. Regret is for people who wish they had chosen differently. I chose exactly what I wanted. I am asking because I need this to become interesting again. There was a time when this felt like an art. I studied people. I waited. I planned. I adapted. Now I send one pleasant message, and someone tells me where they live. I smile at a stranger, and they follow me. I suggest somewhere quieter, and they agree. There is no challenge in it. No patience. No skill. You have taken all the beauty out of the game. Please stop being so easy. Make me wonder whether you noticed me. Make me work to learn your name. Make me follow you through a crowded place and watch you glance over your shoulder. Make me question whether you told someone about me. Give yourself a chance. Give me a reason to hesitate. Because if you continue behaving this way, I will not be the only one who notices. There are others. Some are less patient than I am. Some are crueler. Some will hurt you simply because they can. At least I am warning you. You may think this is only a story. You may believe these words were written to frighten you. That is fine. The truth does not require your belief. But before you close this, look at the information you have shared today. Think about the photographs you posted. Think about the stranger you agreed to meet this weekend. Think about the person who asked whether you lived alone. Think about the car you have seen more than once near your home. Think about the moment your instincts warned you and you chose to ignore them. Then ask yourself one question. How difficult would it really be for someone to find you? Do not answer aloud. I might be listening. Story 5. My friends and I decided to go camping deep in the woods of northern Georgia. At the time, it sounded like a good idea. One of my friends had found a place far away from the usual campsites, hiking trails, and crowded parks. He said it would be quieter there. No families, no loud music, no children running between tents, and no park rangers checking on us every few hours. It would just be us, the trees, and the cold night air. There were 6 of us altogether. Most of the group had been camping before, although none of us had spent a night that deep in the woods. We brought 2 tents, several sleeping bags, food, water, lanterns, and enough beer to make us believe we were prepared for anything. We also brought a man named Travis. Travis was not exactly one of my friends. He was an old army buddy of my friend Daniel. He had served overseas and later worked private security. Daniel invited him because the area was known for black bears, wild hogs, and the occasional person who liked to cause trouble around isolated campsites. Travis brought a long rifle with a scope. We joked that bringing a trained sniper on a camping trip was a little extreme, but none of us asked him to leave the rifle at home. By the time we reached the campsite, the sun was already dropping behind the trees. The place was more isolated than I had expected. There was no proper road leading to it, only a narrow dirt track covered in fallen leaves and deep tire marks. We parked near a clearing and carried our equipment the rest of the way. The forest surrounded us on every side. The trees were tall, crowded, and dark. Their branches blocked most of the fading sunlight. The deeper we walked, the quieter everything became. There were no cars in the distance, no voices, no sounds from houses, only the wind moving through bare branches and the occasional crack from somewhere deep in the woods. The temperature dropped quickly after sunset. By 9 o'clock, it was freezing. We sat around the fire wearing thick coats, gloves, and wool hats. Every time the wind blew through the clearing, sparks rose into the darkness and disappeared between the trees. The fire was the only thing that made the campsite feel safe. Outside the small circle of orange light, the forest looked endless. Sometimes I thought I saw shapes moving between the trunks, but whenever I looked closely, there was nothing there. My friends laughed, drank, and told stories. Travis stayed mostly quiet. He sat with the rifle across his knees, watching the trees. At one point, Daniel asked whether he had seen something. No, Travis said, just listening. That answer did not make me feel better. Around midnight, the fire started dying. The large logs had burned down to glowing red pieces, and the smaller branches were almost gone. Everyone else had either gone into the tents or was too comfortable to get up. Daniel looked toward the small pile of firewood. We need more, he said. Nobody moved. After a few seconds, I stood. I'll get it. One of my friends offered to come with me, but I told him it would only take a minute. There were plenty of fallen branches near the edge of the clearing. I grabbed a small flashlight from my backpack. It was cheap and old. The plastic case was cracked, and the beam flickered whenever I moved it too quickly. Travis looked at the flashlight and frowned. Don't go far, he said. I won't. I walked away from the fire. The warmth disappeared almost immediately. Cold air pressed against my face, and the darkness seemed to close around me. The flashlight beam was weak and narrow, showing only a few feet of ground ahead. Dry leaves cracked under my boots. I began gathering branches, stacking them beneath one arm. I could still hear my friends talking behind me, but their voices became quieter with every step. Then I heard running water. It sounded like a small stream somewhere to my right. I stopped. We had not noticed any water when we arrived, and I remembered Daniel saying there was supposed to be a creek somewhere nearby. I was curious. I thought I might be able to fill one of our containers in the morning if the water looked clean. Instead of returning to camp, I followed the sound. That was the biggest mistake of my life. The trees grew thicker as I moved deeper into the forest. Thin branches caught on my jacket and scratched against my face. The running water became louder. After several minutes, the ground began to slope downward. The leaves beneath my boots turned damp, and the cold air carried a smell of mud and rotting plants. I pushed through a group of bushes. A small pond appeared in front of me. It was hidden completely by the surrounding trees. The water was black and still except near one side, where a narrow stream poured over a line of rocks. My flashlight moved across the surface. At first, I thought I saw a large fallen tree in the middle of the pond. Then it moved. A huge black bear stood in the shallow water. It was one of the largest animals I had ever seen. Its fur was wet and covered in mud. Water reached halfway up its legs. The bear held something between its front paws. I raised the flashlight. My stomach turned. It was a human leg, a girl's leg. The flesh had been torn away around the knee, and the foot was still wearing a dirty white shoe. The bear held the thigh against its mouth and pulled strips of flesh from it with its teeth. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. Instead, I stood behind a tree, unable to move. The bear chewed slowly. Bones cracked between its jaws. Then it spoke. At first, I thought the sound came from somewhere else. The voice was too strange to understand. It was deep and rough, like an animal growl, mixed with a person trying to speak through a damaged throat. The bear's jaw moved as it talked. It did not move like a human mouth. Its lower jaw twisted too far to one side, then snapped back into place with a terrible cracking sound. "Did you have to see me talking?" the bear asked. It was looking down at something floating near its feet. I moved the flashlight slightly. A body lay half underwater. It belonged to a young woman. Her face was pale, and her wet hair floated around her head. One arm had been torn away. Her eyes were open. The bear continued speaking to her as though she were still alive. "Was that really necessary?" it asked. Its jaw cracked between every few words. "You know I'm a predator. You know I like meat. It's your fault I killed you." The bear tore another piece from the thigh. "What were you doing outside this late anyway? You practically asked for it." I pressed one hand over my mouth. My mind could not accept what I was seeing. Bears did not talk. Animals did not stand in ponds and argue with dead bodies. For a moment, I wondered whether I was dreaming. Maybe the cold had confused me. Maybe someone had put something in my drink. But the smell was real. Blood, mud, wet fur, and rotting flesh mixed together in the freezing air. The bear laughed. It was not a normal animal sound. It was a low human chuckle trapped inside a growl. "You could have stayed home," it told the body. "You could have minded your business." It shook the leg in its paws. "But no, you had to come into my woods." I began stepping backward. I moved slowly, trying not to breathe too loudly. The flashlight shook in my hand. I kept the beam pointed toward the ground, afraid the bear would notice the light. One step, then another. My boot came down on a dry branch. Snap! The sound echoed across the pond. The bear stopped chewing. Its head turned toward me so quickly that its jaw made another sharp cracking noise. The flashlight beam landed directly on its face. Its eyes reflected the light. They did not look like the eyes of an animal. There was intelligence in them. Human intelligence. They looked angry, cold, and completely aware. The bear dropped the leg into the water. It stood on its hind legs. The creature was enormous. Its head nearly reached the lower branches of the trees. Water and blood dripped from its fur. Its stomach was covered in dark stains. The smell reached me from across the pond. It smelled like rotting meat left inside a hot room. The bear stepped out of the water. It walked upright. Not clumsily, the way bears sometimes stand for a few seconds. It walked like a man. Each step was slow and careful. I wanted to run, but my legs would not move. The creature crossed the muddy ground and stopped directly in front of me. Its face was only a few feet from mine. Up close, I could see pieces of flesh caught between its teeth. One of the girl's hairs hung from the corner of its mouth. The bear lowered its head. "Another listener," it said calmly. Its breath was warm and foul. "Do you people have no respect for these woods?" I tried to speak. Nothing came out. I stepped backward. The bear watched me. For 1 second, it looked almost offended. Then its expression changed. Its lips pulled back from its teeth. Its eyes widened. The calm voice disappeared. The bear released a roar that sounded like two noises at once: the deep, powerful roar of an animal and the furious scream of a man. Its jaws opened wide. I saw blood and pieces of meat inside its mouth. It lunged toward my throat. I turned and ran. Branches struck my face as I crashed through the trees. I dropped the firewood almost immediately. My flashlight beam bounced wildly across trunks, rocks, and leaves. Behind me, I heard the bear moving. It was fast. Far too fast. Heavy paws struck the ground, but mixed with them were footsteps that sounded almost human. I did not look back. I knew if I saw how close it was, I would stop running. The creature spoke from the darkness behind me. "You're making me run in this cold." Its voice sounded close enough to touch me. "This is so disrespectful." Its jaw cracked beside my ear. I screamed and ran faster. I could hear it laughing. The sound moved around me. Sometimes it came from behind, sometimes from the trees to my left. Once I heard the voice directly ahead. "You came into my home," it said. I changed direction and nearly fell down a steep slope. My ankle twisted, but I kept running. The forest looked completely different. I had followed the water for only a few minutes, yet now I could not remember which direction led back to camp. Every tree looked the same. The flashlight flickered. "No," I whispered. The light went out. I hit it with my palm. Nothing. Darkness swallowed everything. I kept moving with both hands stretched in front of me. Branches cut my skin. I tripped over roots and fell to my knees. Behind me, the bear slowed. I heard it breathing. It was enjoying this. "You should apologize," it called. The voice sounded calm again. I was eating peacefully. I crawled forward. My hand touched something wet and soft. For one terrible second, I thought it was another body. Then I realized it was only moss. The bear's jaw cracked somewhere behind me. "Say you're sorry." I got back on my feet. A faint orange light appeared between the trees. The campfire. I ran toward it. The light grew brighter. I could hear voices now. My friends were laughing, unaware of what was coming. "Help!" I screamed. The bear roared behind me. I broke through the final line of trees and collapsed in the campsite. My friends jumped up. I landed beside the fire, gasping and crying. My stomach turned, and I vomited onto the ground. "What happened?" Daniel shouted. I pointed toward the trees. I could not form a full sentence. "Bear," I managed. "There's a bear." Travis was already moving. He stood with the rifle pressed against his shoulder, aiming into the darkness. "Where?" I pointed. "Out there." It was talking. My friends stared at me. What do you mean, talking? It killed someone. There's a girl in the pond. Travis did not laugh. He kept the rifle steady. Something moved between the trees. A large black shape passed behind one trunk, then another. The firelight reflected in two intelligent eyes. Travis aimed. The bear stopped just outside the light. I heard its breathing. Then its voice came quietly from the forest. Coward, Travis fired. The shot exploded through the campsite. Birds flew from the trees. The black shape disappeared. Travis moved forward, but Daniel grabbed his arm. Don't go after it. For several minutes, we waited. Nothing came out of the woods. The bear did not speak again. Eventually, Travis lowered the rifle. We're leaving at sunrise, he said. Nobody argued. We did not sleep. We added every piece of wood we had to the fire and sat close together until morning. I kept expecting the bear to step into the clearing. Sometimes I heard branches breaking beyond the light. Once, something scratched against the tree near the tents. Whenever Travis aimed his rifle, the sound stopped. At sunrise, we packed as quickly as possible. Nobody wanted to visit the pond. I tried to explain where it was, but the others said we needed to leave and call the police from the road. We loaded the vehicles and drove away. Travis kept looking in the mirrors. I looked too. For several miles, I thought I saw a large black shape moving through the trees beside the dirt road. When we reached a place with phone service, Daniel called the police. He told them we had seen a body near a pond and possibly encountered an aggressive bear. Officers took our statements later that day. They searched the area, but they said they could not find the pond. They found no body, no blood, no human remains. They found several bear tracks near our campsite, but nothing unusual. I did not tell the police everything. I knew how it sounded. A talking bear blaming a dead girl for being murdered. Even my friends seemed unsure whether they believed me. They had heard the voice in the woods, but Daniel suggested it might have been a person. Travis said nothing. When I asked him privately what he thought, he stared at me for a long time. That wasn't a person, he finally said. For the next 2 weeks, I lived in constant fear. I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the bear standing in the pond with the girl's leg in its paws. I heard its voice. You made me do it. You should apologize. I locked my bedroom door every night. I pushed furniture against it. I nailed my windows shut, even though my mother shouted at me for damaging the frames. I kept a large kitchen knife beside me. Most nights, I did not sleep in my bed. I crawled underneath it and lay curled on the floor with the knife pressed against my chest. I knew it was ridiculous. The campsite was hours away. A bear could not know where I lived. But this was not a normal bear. It could speak. It could think. It had seen my face. I imagined it following our vehicles through the forest. I imagined it walking along highways at night, hiding whenever cars passed. Every sound made me panic. A branch touching my window. The heating system turning on. My mother walking down the hall. Sometimes, when the wind blew around the house, I heard a low voice beneath it. This is so disrespectful. I stopped going outside after dark. I missed school. I ignored calls from my friends. My mother thought I had suffered some kind of breakdown. She wanted me to speak to a therapist. I agreed because I could not tell her the truth. Then, early one morning, I woke to the sound of my mother screaming in the kitchen. My eyes opened instantly. For one horrible second, I was back in the forest. I imagined the bear standing over her body. I grabbed the knife and crawled from beneath the bed. My hands shook so badly that I nearly dropped it. My mother screamed again. Animals. Absolute animals. I ran into the hallway and down the stairs. I expected to see blood. I expected to smell rot. Instead, my mother stood in front of the television, wearing her dressing gown. She was alive. Her face was red with anger. She was shouting at the news. "This generation is sick," she said. "They have no respect for anything." I stopped in the doorway, still gripping the knife. My chest hurt from fear. "Mom," she turned. "What are you doing with that?" I barely heard her. My eyes were fixed on the television. A breaking news banner appeared across the bottom of the screen. The news anchor said park rangers had made a terrible discovery deep in the Georgia woods. A famous black bear had been found dead. Its name was Gentle George. I had heard of him before. Almost everyone in Georgia had. Gentle George was believed to be one of the oldest black bears in the state. Hikers had photographed him for years. He was known for staying calm around people. Videos showed him walking slowly across roads while tourists watched. Children wore shirts with his face on them. Park workers had used him in wildlife education campaigns. Everyone described him as harmless. Sweet, Gentle, the anchor, spoke in a sad voice. People across the state were already leaving flowers and signs near the entrance to the park. Then the television showed a photograph of the dead bear. The knife nearly slipped from my hand. Gentle George had been hanged from a massive pine tree. A thick rope was wrapped around his neck. His body hung several feet above the ground. The scene looked less like someone had killed an animal and more like an execution. The anchor explained that the bear had been shot several times before being hanged. 3 bullets in each shoulder, 3 in each knee. The shots had destroyed the joints, making it impossible for the bear to run or defend itself. My stomach dropped. The camera showed a closer photograph of the bear's face. I knew those eyes. Smart, human, full of hate. There was no possibility of a mistake. It was the same bear from the pond, Gentle George. The beloved animal everyone believed was harmless. Someone had discovered what he really was. Someone else had heard him speak. They knew he had killed people. They knew he was not gentle. They had tracked him into the woods, shattered his joints, and dragged him to that tree. The news called the killer a cruel poacher. Police called it an act of senseless violence. My mother called the person a monster. I did not. I thought of the girl in the pond. I thought of the bear blaming her while eating her body. "You know I'm a predator. It's your fault. What were you doing out this late?" It had spoken like a person who had practiced those lies many times. How many others had there been? How many hikers had disappeared in those woods? How many bodies had been hidden in ponds, caves, or deep holes? The knife fell from my hand. It struck the kitchen floor with a loud metal sound. My mother jumped. "What is wrong with you?" I could not answer. For the first time in 2 weeks, the pressure inside my chest disappeared. I could breathe. The bear was dead. It could not follow me. It could not stand outside my bedroom window. It could not break through my door and blame me for making it hungry. The fear left so quickly that my legs became weak. I leaned against the wall. My mother continued complaining about the news report, but her voice seemed far away. I went back upstairs. I pulled the furniture away from my bedroom door. I removed the chair that had been pressed beneath the handle. Then I used a hammer to pull the nails from the window frames. I opened both windows as wide as they would go. Fresh morning air entered the room. Sunlight spread across the floor. For the first time since the camping trip, the world outside did not feel dangerous. I left my bedroom door open. I placed the knife on my desk. Then I climbed onto the bed. I did not crawl beneath it. I lay on top of the blankets and stared at the ceiling. My body felt heavy. I had barely slept in 2 weeks, and now every lost hour seemed to catch up with me at once. Before closing my eyes, I remembered the girl in the pond. I remembered her pale face beneath the dark water. I wondered whether she had known the bear could talk before it killed her. Maybe she had heard it making excuses. Maybe she had spent her final moments listening to it explain why her death was her own fault. I hoped the person who killed Gentle George had known her. Maybe it was her father, her brother, a friend. Maybe they had spent months searching while the whole state celebrated the animal responsible. I pictured the bear lying helpless beneath the pine tree. For once, it had no excuses, no clever words, no victim to blame. I smiled faintly. Finally, I whispered into the quiet room, "You got your revenge." Then I closed my eyes. I slept deeply. No nightmares, no cracking jaw beside my ear, no voice blaming me from the darkness. When I woke, it was evening. For 1 second, I forgot why I felt so calm. Then I remembered the news. Gentle George was dead. I went downstairs. My mother was still watching reports about the bear. People had gathered near the park holding candles and photographs. The state governor had released a statement. Wildlife groups were offering a reward for information about the person responsible. Everyone wanted justice for Gentle George. I watched the mourners cry for the bear. I almost laughed. Then the screen showed footage of the tree where his body had been found. Something was carved into the trunk beneath him. The camera only showed it for a second before cutting away. I paused the television. There were 4 words carved deeply into the bark. "Stop blaming your victims." A cold feeling moved through me. The person who killed the bear had heard him speak. There was no other explanation. They knew exactly what he had said. I wrote the words down before the report continued. For several days, I searched online for information. Most websites focused on the same details. Gentle George had been shot 18 times. His joints had been destroyed. He had been dragged nearly half a mile before being hanged. The killer had left no footprints, no fingerprints, no shell casings. The bullets were from several different rifles. Investigators believed more than one person might have been involved. Then someone posted a photograph taken before the police arrived. In the image, several objects had been arranged beneath the tree. A woman's shoe, a broken necklace, a child's backpack, 3 rings. The police removed the image quickly, but I saved it. The shoe was white. It looked like the one still attached to the leg in the pond. Authorities later announced they were searching the area for possible human remains. They never explained why. A week later, they found the pond. 4 bodies were recovered. The girl I had seen was one of them. The oldest body had been there for nearly 12 years. Gentle George had lived in that forest for decades. He had been loved by tourists, protected by park workers, and photographed by families. All that time, people had been disappearing around him. The official report blamed ordinary bear attacks. It said there was no evidence that the bear had behaved unusually. They did not mention the carved message. They did not mention the objects beneath the tree. They certainly did not mention that he could speak. Travis called me after the bodies were found. He sounded tired. They got him, he said. Do you know who did it? There was a long silence. No, the answer came too slowly. I remembered that Travis had been watching the forest when the rest of us laughed around the fire. I remembered how quickly he raised his rifle. I remembered that he never questioned whether I had heard a talking bear. You believed me, I said. I heard him too. Was it you? Travis did not answer. Then he said something I still think about. There are things in those woods that learn how people speak. Most of them only use words to lure you closer. That one learned something worse. What? How to make you feel responsible for what it does. The call ended. I tried to contact him again, but the number had been disconnected. Daniel said Travis had left town. Nobody knew where he had gone. I never found out whether he killed Gentle George. Maybe he had returned to the forest alone. Maybe he knew others who understood what the bear truly was. Perhaps the people who executed it had been hunting creatures like that for years. I no longer go camping. I do not walk through forests after dark, but I sleep with my windows open now. Most nights, I am not afraid. Gentle George is dead. His body was cremated, so no one could steal it from the wildlife facility. Thousands of people attended a memorial ceremony. They placed a bronze statue of him near the park entrance. The statue shows him standing peacefully on all four legs, looking toward the forest. A small sign beneath it calls him a symbol of gentleness and natural beauty. I visited the statue once. I do not know why. I stood in front of it while families took photographs. Children hugged the bronze bear. Parents told them how friendly Gentle George had been. I looked into the statue's metal eyes. They were empty. Nothing like the intelligent eyes I remembered from the pond. Someone had scratched a message into the back of the statue. It was small enough that most visitors would never notice. I had to bend down to read it. He was not the only one. I left immediately. Sometimes, when the wind moves through the trees behind my house, I hear something that sounds almost like a voice. Most of the time, I tell myself it is only branches rubbing together. But a few nights ago, I heard something outside my open window. A deep animal growl. Then, a wet cracking sound. My body went completely still. The voice that followed was quieter than Gentle George's. It sounded younger. Female, you're sleeping with the window open, it whispered. It's like you want something to happen. I did not move until morning. When the sun came up, I found tracks beneath my window. Bear tracks, smaller than Gentle George's. Beside them was a single muddy footprint, shaped like a human foot. I have not nailed the windows shut again. Not yet. I keep telling myself, Gentle George is dead. I watched the news. I saw his body hanging from the tree. I know he will never speak again. But now I understand what Travis meant. There are things in those woods that learn how people talk. And somewhere out there, another one has learned Gentle George's favorite lesson. It has learned how to make its victims believe everything is their fault.